What if I told you that, hidden within the ancient world, lies a code so powerful, so fundamentally reality-altering, that entire civilizations built their empires around it? A code that modern science has only recently begun to understand, yet shamans and mystics have wielded for thousands of years to bend the very fabric of existence to their will. This isn't some mystical fairy tale or New Age nonsense. This is about discovering the most closely guarded secret in human history. A secret that explains how ancient Egyptians moved massive stone blocks that modern machinery struggles with. How Tibetan monks can raise their body temperature in freezing conditions. How indigenous healers can influence physical matter through pure intention alone. But here's what they don't want you to know. You already possess this code. It's written into your DNA, encoded in your neural pathways, and flowing through your body at this very moment. The problem is, you've been systematically programmed to ignore it, suppress it, and dismiss it as impossible. Today, that changes forever. In the next few minutes, you're going to discover the exact ancient energy code that has been deliberately hidden from you. You'll learn why modern society has spent centuries conditioning you to forget your true power, and most importantly, you'll understand how to activate this code immediately to start reshaping your reality in ways you never thought possible. This isn't about positive thinking or visualization. This is about accessing a fundamental force of nature that operates beyond the limitations of ordinary physics, a force that quantum scientists have been using for millennia. Before we begin, understand this clearly. Once you activate this code, there's no going back. Your perception of what's possible will shatter completely. The comfortable illusions you've been living under will crumble, and you'll realize that everything you've been told about the nature of reality has been a carefully constructed lie designed to keep you powerless. Are you ready for that level of transformation? Because what I'm about to reveal will fundamentally alter how you see yourself, your potential, and your place in this universe. Let me start with something that happened to me personally that changed everything. 3 years ago, I was exactly where you might be right now. Skeptical, logical, believing that reality operated according to fixed laws that couldn't be bent or altered. I was struggling financially, emotionally drained, and completely disconnected from any sense of real power in my life. Then I stumbled across a fragment of an ancient Sumerian text that described something called the Code of Resonant Creation. At first, I dismissed it as primitive superstition, but something about the precision of the language, the mathematical patterns embedded within the symbols, made me dig deeper. What I discovered shook me to my core. This wasn't superstition. This was advanced technology disguised as spiritual practice. The ancients had discovered something that modern science is only now beginning to understand. They had learned how to manipulate the quantum field through specific energetic frequencies generated by human consciousness. The Code of Resonant Creation is based on a simple but profound principle. Everything in existence, from the smallest subatomic particle to the largest galaxy, is vibrating at specific frequencies. These frequencies create interference patterns that we perceive as physical reality. But here's the breakthrough that changes everything. Human consciousness can generate specific frequencies that interact with these quantum interference patterns. When you align your consciousness with the right frequency signature, you can literally rewrite the interference patterns that create your reality. You become the programmer instead of the program. Ancient civilizations understood this principle intimately. They built their entire spiritual and technological systems around it. The pyramids weren't just tombs. They were massive resonance chambers designed to amplify human consciousness and focus it with surgical precision. The stone circles, the temples, the sacred geometries carved into mountains, they were all part of a sophisticated technology for reality manipulation. But somewhere along the way, this knowledge was suppressed, hidden, locked away in secret societies and mystery schools, while the masses were fed simplified religions that stripped away the practical applications and left only empty rituals. Why would this knowledge be suppressed? Think about it logically. If every human being understood their true power to reshape reality through consciousness, how would existing power structures survive? How could governments control populations who could manifest abundance at will? How could corporations profit from scarcity when people could create whatever they needed? The suppression wasn't accidental. It was systematic, deliberate, and brilliantly executed. Modern education teaches you that consciousness is just a byproduct of brain chemistry, that you're a powerless observer in a mechanical universe governed by fixed laws, that change comes only through physical effort, external resources, and long periods of struggle. Every institution you encounter reinforces this limiting worldview. But quantum physics has shattered these illusions completely. The double-slit experiment proves that consciousness directly influences physical reality at the quantum level. Particles behave differently when observed by conscious awareness. This isn't theory anymore, it's established scientific fact. The observer effect demonstrates that consciousness isn't separate from reality. It's the primary creative force that shapes reality. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle shows that at the quantum level, particles exist in states of pure potential until consciousness collapses them into specific outcomes. This means reality isn't fixed, it's fluid, malleable, and constantly being shaped by conscious observation. Quantum entanglement reveals that everything in the universe is interconnected through invisible information networks that transcend space and time. When you change the state of one particle, its entangled partner changes instantaneously, regardless of distance. This suggests that consciousness can influence reality non-locally, beyond the constraints of physical proximity. These aren't fringe theories anymore. These are foundational principles of modern physics that completely validate what ancient masters knew thousands of years ago. Now here's where this gets practical and immediately applicable to your life. The ancient energy code operates through three fundamental principles that you can start using right now. These aren't complex rituals or mystical practices that take years to master. These are simple, scientific techniques that produce measurable results when applied correctly. The first principle is frequency alignment. Every desire, every outcome you want to experience, has a specific energetic frequency. Success has a frequency, abundance has a frequency, health, love, creativity, they all vibrate at distinct energetic signatures. When you learn to generate and sustain these frequencies within your own consciousness, you create resonance with the corresponding reality. Think of it like tuning a radio. Right now, your consciousness is probably tuned to frequencies of lack, limitation, and struggle, because that's what you've been conditioned to broadcast. But when you consciously shift to the frequency of abundance, your reality has no choice but to reorganize itself to match that new signal. The ancient masters developed precise techniques for generating specific frequencies. They used sound, visualization, breathwork, and focused intention to create coherent, energetic states that could influence physical matter. Modern neuroscience now confirms that these practices create measurable changes in brain chemistry and electromagnetic output. The second principle is coherent intention. Most people think sporadically, emotionally, and chaotically. Their consciousness scatters in multiple directions simultaneously, creating conflicting frequencies that cancel each other out. This is why most attempts at manifestation fail completely. Ancient practitioners understood that consciousness must be unified, coherent, and precisely focused to generate reality-altering effects. They developed sophisticated methods for achieving what we now call coherent brain states, where different regions of the brain synchronize and amplify each other's output. When your consciousness achieves coherence, something extraordinary happens. Your brain begins producing powerful electromagnetic fields that extend beyond your body and interact directly with the quantum field around you. This field carries the information patterns of your intentions and begins reorganizing local reality to match those patterns. The third principle is sustained resonance. Most people generate powerful intentions for brief moments, then immediately return to their default frequency patterns of doubt, fear, and limitation. This creates what ancient texts call energy whiplash, where conflicting frequencies tear apart any progress toward manifestation. True reality alteration requires sustained resonance with your desired outcome. You must maintain the frequency signature of your intention long enough for it to take root in the quantum field and begin materializing in physical form. The ancients developed specific practices for maintaining energetic states for extended periods, allowing their intentions to fully crystallize into manifest reality. Here's what makes this immediately practical for you. You don't need to spend years studying ancient texts or learning complex meditation techniques. The core principles can be applied using simple, scientifically validated methods that produce results within days or weeks of consistent practice. But there's something crucial you need to understand before we go deeper. The same forces that suppressed this knowledge for centuries are still operating today. They've simply adapted their methods to modern news times, social media cycles, entertainment systems, even educational institutions are all designed to keep your consciousness fragmented, reactive, and focused on external circumstances rather than internal power. Every time you scroll through social media, you're allowing external forces to dictate your frequency signature. Every time you watch fear-based news, you're tuning your consciousness to frequencies of scarcity and danger. Every time you engage in mindless entertainment, you're dissipating the coherent energy needed for reality alteration. This isn't accidental. It's a sophisticated system for keeping humanity disconnected from its true creative power. But once you understand how this system works, you can break free from it completely. You can reclaim your natural ability to generate reality-altering frequencies. You can step into the same power that built the pyramids, that allowed ancient masters to transcend physical limitations, that created miracles that modern science still can't explain. The question isn't whether this power exists. Quantum physics has proven it beyond any doubt. The question is whether you're ready to claim it for yourself. In the next section, we're going to dive deep into the specific techniques that will activate your dormant abilities and show you exactly how to begin reshaping your reality using the same principles that ancient masters guarded with their lives. The moment you decide to activate this ancient code, everything shifts. Not gradually, not over time, but immediately. Your nervous system recognizes something it's been waiting for your entire life. A frequency signature that awakens dormant circuits in your brain that have been offline since childhood. But here's what nobody tells you about this activation process. It's not comfortable. It's not gentle. When you start generating reality-altering frequencies, your current reality begins to destabilize. The comfortable patterns you've been living in start to crack and crumble. Your mind will resist this process with everything it has because change, even positive change, triggers ancient survival mechanisms. This is why most people quit before they see results. They activate the code, reality starts shifting, and their primitive brain screams danger. They retreat back to their familiar limitations because the unknown feels more threatening than their current suffering. But you're not most people. You're here because something inside you recognizes the truth of what I'm sharing. Your soul remembers this power, even if your mind has forgotten it. Let me show you exactly how this activation works at the neurological level. When you begin practicing these ancient techniques, your brain starts producing what neuroscientists call gamma waves. These are the highest frequency brain waves measurable by current technology, and they only appear during states of heightened consciousness and peak performance. Here's where it gets fascinating. Gamma waves don't just happen in your brain. They create a cascade effect throughout your entire nervous system, synchronizing every cell in your body to operate at this elevated frequency. Your heart rhythm becomes coherent, your breathing deepens automatically, your electromagnetic field expands and intensifies. Ancient masters called this state the Great Awakening. Modern science calls it optimal human functioning. Whatever you call it, when you achieve this state consistently, reality becomes fluid. Obstacles dissolve, synchronicities multiply, resources appear from nowhere. People are inexplicably drawn to help you, doors open that were previously invisible. This isn't mysticism. This is measurable, reproducible neuroscience combined with quantum physics principles that most people never learn to apply consciously. Now, let me reveal the first technique that will begin your activation immediately. I call it quantum breathing, but the ancient Sumerian texts referred to it as the breath of creation. This isn't ordinary breathing. This is a precise method for generating coherent brain states and expanding your electromagnetic field to interact directly with the quantum matrix around you. Find a quiet space where you won't be interrupted. Sit comfortably, with your spine straight but not rigid. Place one hand on your chest, one on your belly. Close your eyes and begin breathing naturally, just observing the rhythm without changing anything yet. Now here's the key. You're going to breathe in a specific pattern that synchronizes your brain hemispheres and activates your pineal gland. Inhale slowly through your nose for exactly 4 counts, feeling your belly expand first, then your chest. Hold that breath for 4 counts while visualizing energy gathering at the center of your brain. Exhale through slightly parted lips for 6 counts, imagining that energy radiating outward through your entire body and beyond. But the breathing is just the foundation. The real power comes from what you do with your consciousness during this process. As you inhale, you're not just taking in air, you're drawing in pure potential from the quantum field. As you hold your breath, you're allowing that potential to organize itself according to your intention. As you exhale, you're broadcasting that organized energy into reality. Most people breathe unconsciously their entire lives, never realizing they're missing the primary tool for reality manipulation that's been available to them every single moment. Practice this quantum breathing pattern for just 5 minutes, and you'll notice immediate changes. Your thinking becomes clearer, your emotional state stabilizes, you feel more centered, more powerful, more connected to something vast and intelligent. That's your nervous system remembering its natural state before conditioning shut it down. But quantum breathing is just the beginning. The second technique will unlock something even more profound. It's called frequency embedding and is based on a discovery that ancient Egyptian priests made over 4,000 years ago. They realized that human consciousness could encode specific information patterns into the quantum field through focused visualization combined with emotional intensity. Not random visualization, but precise, geometric patterns that correspond to different aspects of reality. Success has a geometry, abundance has a geometry, love, health, creativity, they all have specific information structures that can be embedded into your personal quantum field. Here's how this works practically. Choose one specific outcome you want to manifest, not something vague like, I want to be happy, but something concrete and measurable. Maybe it's a specific amount of money, a particular opportunity, or a definite change in your circumstances. Now, instead of just thinking about this outcome, you're going to encode it geometrically. Visualize your desired outcome as a sphere of brilliant golden light. See this sphere rotating slowly in the space about 6 inches in front of your heart. As it rotates, watch information patterns flowing through it like liquid light, encoding every detail of your intention into its structure. The key is emotional intensity. The ancient masters understood that emotion isn't just feeling, it's energetic fuel. The stronger your emotional connection to the outcome, the more powerfully it embeds into the quantum field. Feel the joy of already having what you desire. Feel the relief of the problem already being solved. Feel the excitement of the opportunity already manifesting. Hold this visualization for exactly 9 minutes while maintaining the quantum breathing pattern. 9 minutes is the minimum time required for information to stabilize in the quantum matrix. Less than that, and the pattern dissipates before it can take root in reality. When you complete this practice, something remarkable happens. You've created what ancient texts called a reality seed. This seed contains the complete information pattern of your desired outcome, and it begins growing automatically in the quantum field. You don't need to force it or struggle to make it happen. The universe itself begins rearranging circumstances to bring that pattern into physical manifestation. But here's the crucial part that most people miss completely. After you plant this reality seed, you must release it. You cannot obsess over it, worry about it, or constantly check to see if it's working. doubt, and anxiety are destructive frequencies that will shatter the delicate quantum patterns you've created. This is where the third technique becomes essential. I call it energetic detachment, but the ancient masters knew it as the art of sacred release. This isn't about not caring whether your intention manifests. It's about maintaining such complete confidence in the process that you can let go of desperate attachment to the outcome. Think about planting a seed in your garden. After you plant it, you don't dig it up every day to see if it's growing. You water it occasionally, give it sunlight, and trust the natural process. Energetic detachment works the same way with reality seeds. The practice is simple but requires discipline. After completing your frequency embedding session, spend 2 minutes in complete mental silence. No thoughts about the outcome. No planning how it might happen. No wondering when it will arrive. Just pure, empty awareness. During this silence, repeat this ancient phrase internally. It is already complete in the realm of infinite potential. I release it to manifest in perfect timing. Then, open your eyes and engage fully with whatever activity comes next, without giving another thought to your intention. This release phase activates what quantum physicists call the observer effect in reverse. Instead of collapsing potential into specific outcomes through observation, you're allowing infinite potential to choose the optimal path for manifestation without interference from your limited conscious mind. Most people sabotage their manifestations during this phase because they can't tolerate the uncertainty. They plant the reality seed, then immediately start digging it up with worry, doubt, and obsessive mental analysis. This destroys the quantum coherence necessary for manifestation to occur. But when you master energy detachment, miracles become routine. Opportunities appear from impossible directions. Solutions emerge that your rational mind never could have conceived. Resources flow to you through synchronicities that defy logical explanation. The ancient masters, who built civilizations using these principles, understood something that modern people have forgotten. Reality responds to consciousness, but only when that consciousness operates from a state of relaxed certainty rather than desperate need. When you need something, you broadcast the frequency of lack. When you want something urgently, you generate the vibration of not having it. But when you know with calm certainty that your intention is already manifesting in the quantum realm, you align with the frequency of having, and physical reality must rearrange itself to match that signal. This is why ancient texts speak of manifestation as an art of being rather than doing. You don't create your reality through frantic action or desperate effort. You create it by becoming the person who already lives in that reality, then allowing the external world to catch up with your internal transformation. The fourth technique takes this principle even deeper. It's called timeline jumping, and it's based on the most advanced understanding of quantum mechanics that ancient masters possessed. They realized that all possible versions of your life exist simultaneously as probability waves in the quantum field. The version you experience depends entirely on which probability wave your consciousness is most aligned with. Right now, there's a version of you living in abundance. There's a version of you who has already solved your biggest problems. There's a version of you who possesses all the skills, resources, and opportunities you currently desire. These aren't fantasies or wishful thinking. According to quantum physics, they're equally real alternatives existing in parallel probability streams. Timeline jumping is the practice of consciously shifting your awareness from your current probability stream to a more desirable one. When you achieve this shift completely, your external reality begins transforming to match the new timeline you've selected. Here's the specific process. Enter the quantum breathing state and achieve the frequency embedding visualization. But instead of just seeing your desired outcome, you're going to step fully into the reality where that outcome already exists. See yourself living that life in complete detail. Feel the emotions of already having everything you desire. But here's the advanced part. You're not just visualizing this alternative reality. You're claiming it as your true reality and relegating your current circumstances to the status of a temporary illusion. You're essentially telling the quantum field that the abundant, successful, fulfilled version of you is the real you, and everything else is just outdated information that needs to be updated. This requires absolute commitment to the new identity. You cannot waffle between timelines. You cannot hedge your bets by maintaining attachment to your current limitations. Timeline jumping demands that you burn the bridges to your old reality and step fully into the new one, even before external evidence appears. When you master this technique, reality shifts happen rapidly and dramatically. But I must warn you, this level of manifestation comes with responsibility. You're no longer playing with surface-level changes. You're restructuring the fundamental information patterns that create your life experience. The ancient masters who possessed this knowledge were carefully selected and rigorously trained because they understood the power they were wielding. They knew that consciousness capable of jumping timelines could just as easily create disasters as miracles, if not properly disciplined and ethically grounded. This is why the final technique in the ancient code focuses not on getting more, but on becoming more. It's called consciousness expansion, and it ensures that as your power to reshape reality grows, your wisdom and responsibility grow proportionally. The ancient masters understood something that modern society has systematically erased from human awareness. They knew that expanding your power to manipulate reality without simultaneously expanding your consciousness creates dangerous instability. When you gain the ability to bend the quantum field to your will, but lack the wisdom to use that power responsibly, you become a threat not just to yourself, but to the entire fabric of reality around you. This is why every authentic mystery school throughout history required years of character development before teaching advanced manifestation techniques. They weren't being secretive for the sake of exclusivity. They were protecting both the student and the world from the catastrophic consequences of immature, consciousness-wielding, reality-altering power. Think about this logically. If you suddenly gain the ability to reshape physical matter through thought alone, but you still operated from patterns of anger, fear, revenge, or selfish desire, what kind of reality would you create? The ancient texts are filled with warnings about practitioners who mastered the technical aspects of reality manipulation, but failed to develop the emotional and spiritual maturity to handle that level of power responsible. They created chaos. They destabilized entire civilizations. They turned their incredible abilities against themselves and everyone around them, ultimately destroying both their power and their lives in spectacular fashion. This is why consciousness expansion isn't optional if you're serious about mastering the ancient energy code. It's the foundation that makes everything else possible and sustainable. Consciousness expansion operates on a principle that quantum physicists are only beginning to understand. As your awareness grows, your capacity to perceive and interact with higher dimensional aspects of reality increases exponentially. You begin seeing patterns, connections, and possibilities that were completely invisible to your previous level of consciousness. But here's what makes this process so profound. Consciousness expansion doesn't just change what you can do. It fundamentally alters who you are. Your values shift, your priorities reorganize, your emotional responses mature. You naturally begin making choices that benefit not just yourself, but everyone and everything connected to you. The ancient Egyptians called this process the Great Work. The transformation of base consciousness into something approaching divine awareness. Not because you become some kind of supernatural being, but because you finally start operating from your true potential instead of the artificial limitations that have been programmed into you since birth. The specific technique for consciousness expansion that I'm about to share has been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. It's been disguised as religious ritual, philosophical meditation, and spiritual practice. But at its core, it's a precise method for upgrading your neural architecture to process higher dimensional information. I call it the unity field activation, but ancient texts referred to it as the opening of the inner eye. This isn't about developing psychic abilities or mystical experiences, though those often occur naturally as side effects. This is about expanding your conscious awareness to encompass levels of reality that most people never know exist. Find a time when you can practice this without interruption, for at least 20 minutes. Begin with the quantum breathing pattern to establish coherent brain states. But instead of focusing on any specific outcome or intention, you're going to do something that might seem counterintuitive at first. You're going to expand your awareness beyond the boundaries of your individual identity. Start by feeling the energy field around your physical body. Sense the electromagnetic patterns that extend several feet beyond your skin. Don't visualize this, actually feel it. Your nervous system can detect these fields directly once you learn to pay attention to the subtle sensations they create. Now gradually expand that field of awareness outward. Feel it encompassing the room you're in, then the building, then the entire area around you. Keep expanding until your awareness includes your entire city, your region, your country, your confidant, the planet itself. But don't stop there. Expand further to include the solar system, the galaxy, and eventually the entire universe. This isn't imagination or visualization. You're actually stretching your conscious awareness to match the infinite field of consciousness that permeates all of existence. What happens during this process is extraordinary. Your brain begins operating in states that neuroscientists have only recently discovered. Gamma wave activity increases dramatically. Neural networks that normally function independently begin synchronizing. Your pineal gland activates and starts producing neurochemicals that exist nowhere else in nature. Ancient masters called this the God state, but modern science recognizes it as the highest level of human cognitive functioning possible. In this expanded state of consciousness, you don't just think about solutions to problems, you directly perceive the optimal path through any challenge. You don't just desire certain outcomes, you see the entire web of cause and effect that determines which outcomes are truly beneficial and which are ultimately destructive. This is why consciousness expansion is so crucial for anyone working with reality manipulation techniques. When your awareness operates from this expanded perspective, you naturally make choices that create positive outcomes for everyone involved. You stop trying to force reality to conform to your limited personal desires and start aligning with the deeper intelligence that orchestrates the entire universe. But here's where most people encounter their greatest obstacle. The ego mind absolutely hates consciousness expansion because it threatens everything the ego believes about identity and control. When you start experiencing yourself as part of an infinite field of consciousness, rather than a separate individual fighting for survival, the ego panics and does everything possible to pull you back into limitation. But this is where you'll face your ultimate test. The voice in your head will tell you this is dangerous, that you're losing yourself, that you need to retreat back to the safety of small thinking and predictable limitations. Every fear, doubt, and limiting belief you've ever carried will surface with incredible intensity to prevent this expansion from occurring. The ancient masters called this the dark night of the soul, and they understood it as the final barrier between ordinary human consciousness and expanded awareness. Everyone who has ever achieved true mastery of reality-altering abilities has had to navigate this psychological gauntlet successfully. The key is recognizing that these fears aren't real warnings about genuine danger. They're just the death throes of outdated mental programming that has kept you trapped in limitation your entire life. The ego mind would rather keep you small and suffering than allow you to discover your true power and potential. When you push through this resistance and maintain your expanded awareness despite the ego's protests, something miraculous occurs. You realize that you haven't lost anything essential about yourself. Instead, you've gained access to a vastly larger version of who you really are. From this expanded perspective, the techniques I've been teaching you become effortless. Quantum breathing happens naturally. Frequency embedding occurs automatically. Timeline jumping becomes as simple as choosing which channel to watch on television. Reality manipulation transforms from difficult practice into spontaneous expression of your natural ability. But the real gift of consciousness expansion goes far beyond personal manifestation abilities. When you operate from expanded awareness, you become a force for positive transformation in the world around you. Your very presence begins upgrading the consciousness of everyone you encounter. Your energy field carries information patterns that help others remember their own forgotten power. This is how the ancient energy code was originally designed to function. Not as a tool for individual gain, but as a method for elevating human consciousness collectively. The masters who developed these techniques understood that reality manipulation without wisdom creates chaos. But consciousness expansion naturally generates both power and the responsibility to use that power for the greater good. The final layer of the ancient code involves what I call reality stabilization. Once you've learned to jump timelines and manipulate quantum fields, you need to know how to stabilize your new reality so it becomes permanent rather than temporary. Most people who discover reality manipulation abilities experience dramatic shifts followed by equally dramatic reversals. They manifest their desires quickly, then watch them disappear just as fast. They jump to better timelines only to find themselves sliding back to previous limitations. This happens because they never learned how to anchor their new reality in stable quantum patterns. Ancient masters solved this problem through a process they called the crystallization of intent. Once a desired outcome manifested, they would perform specific practices to lock that new reality into permanent existence. These weren't complex rituals, but precise applications of consciousness that created unbreakable quantum structures. The technique involves returning to your expanded awareness state and examining the quantum patterns that created your manifestation. You can actually perceive these patterns directly when your consciousness operates at the expanded level. They appear as geometric structures of light and information that maintain the stability of your new reality. What you do next requires absolute precision. You consciously reinforce these quantum structures by flooding them with coherent energy from your heart center. This isn't emotional energy, but the pure life force that emanates from your cardiac electromagnetic field when it achieves perfect coherence. As you channel this energy into the quantum patterns supporting your new reality, they become crystallized. Instead of remaining fluid and changeable, they lock into permanent configurations that cannot be destabilized by doubt, fear, or external circumstances. This crystallization process typically takes 90 days of consistent practice. During this period, you're essentially training reality to maintain your new circumstances as the default setting, rather than a temporary anomaly. Ancient texts describe this as the period of testing, because your old reality will make every effort to reassert itself during these crucial months. But once crystallization is complete, your new reality becomes as permanent and stable as gravity. It requires no ongoing effort to maintain, because it's now encoded into the fundamental structure of your personal quantum field. This is how the ancient masters created lasting civilizations and permanent transformations. They didn't just manipulate reality temporarily. They rewrote the basic code that determines how reality functions, creating changes that endured for thousands of years. Now you possess the complete ancient energy code that has been hidden from humanity for millennia. Quantum breathing to establish coherent brain states, frequency embedding to plant reality seeds in the quantum field, energetic detachment to allow manifestation without interference, consciousness expansion to access higher dimensional awareness, and reality stabilization to make all changes permanent. These aren't just techniques, they're the fundamental operating principles of consciousness itself. When you master them completely, you step into the same level of power that built the pyramids, moved mountains, and created miracles that modern science still cannot explain. But remember this crucial truth. With great power comes great responsibility. The ancient masters who possessed this knowledge used it not for personal gain, but to elevate all of humanity. They understood that individual consciousness and collective consciousness are ultimately one unified field, and that harming others through misuse of these abilities inevitably destroys the practitioner as well. The choice is now yours. You can dismiss this knowledge as impossible and return to the comfortable limitations you've always known. Or you can begin the practice that will transform you into everything you were meant to become. The ancient energy code is awakening within you at this very moment. Your cells remember this power, even if your mind has forgotten it. Your DNA carries the blueprint for abilities that transcend ordinary human limitations. The only question remaining is whether you have the courage to claim what has always been rightfully yours. The moment you make the decision to fully embrace this ancient code, your entire energetic signature begins shifting at the cellular level. But here's what nobody prepares you for during this transformation process. Your old reality doesn't just fade quietly into the background. It fights back with everything it has. Think about this from a quantum perspective. Every limitation you've accepted, every belief about what's possible or impossible, every pattern of scarcity or struggle has created stable quantum structures in your personal energy field. These structures have been reinforced thousands of times through repetition, emotional investment, and unconscious agreement with collective programming. When you start generating new frequencies through the ancient code practices, you're essentially declaring war on these entrenched patterns. Your nervous system recognizes the threat to its familiar operating parameters and launches what I call the Reality Defense Protocol. Every fear you've ever suppressed surfaces simultaneously. Doubt becomes overwhelming. Circumstances appear to get worse before they get better. And this isn't failure. This is proof that the code is working. Ancient texts describe this phenomenon as the threshold guardian. Every hero's journey includes this crucial test, where the old self makes its final desperate attempt to maintain control. The masters who developed these techniques understood that this resistance phase was absolutely necessary for permanent transformation to occur. Here's why this happens at the neurological level. Your brain has spent decades creating neural pathways that support your current reality. These pathways are like superhighways of electrical activity that process information according to established patterns. When you begin practicing quantum breathing and frequency embedding, you're literally carving new neural pathways while the old ones are still active. Your brain doesn't know whether these new pathways are beneficial or dangerous, so it defaults to survival mode. It floods your system with stress chemicals designed to make you retreat to familiar behaviors. It generates thoughts that seem completely logical, but are actually just attempts to sabotage your transformation. The critical insight that separates successful practitioners from those who quit is understanding that this resistance isn't coming from your true self. It's coming from outdated programming that's fighting for its survival. When you recognize these thoughts and emotions as artifacts of your old reality, rather than accurate assessments of your current situation, their power over you dissolves instantly. But there's a specific technique the ancient masters used to navigate this resistance phase successfully. They called it the mirror of truth, and it's based on a profound understanding of how consciousness creates experience through projection. Every external obstacle, every person who suddenly becomes difficult, every circumstance that appears to block your progress is actually a reflection of internal resistance that hasn't been fully resolved. Instead of fighting these external manifestations, you use them as diagnostic tools to identify which aspects of your consciousness still need upgrading. Here's how this works practically. When you encounter resistance in your external environment, immediately ask yourself this question: what part of me still believes this limitation is real? The answer will reveal exactly which neural pathways need additional rewiring through the ancient code techniques. For example, if money becomes scarce, just as you're working to manifest abundance, the resistance isn't coming from external economic forces. It's coming from subconscious beliefs about worthiness, safety, or the nature of abundance itself. Once you identify the specific belief creating the resistance, you can target it directly, using frequency embedding and timeline jumping techniques. This transforms every obstacle from a roadblock into a stepping stone. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to deepen your mastery of the ancient code. Every setback reveals another layer of limitation that can be transcended through proper application of consciousness expansion practices. The masters who achieved permanent reality alteration understood that resistance wasn't their enemy. It was their teacher, showing them exactly where their consciousness needed additional refinement. They welcomed challenges because each one brought them closer to complete mastery of their creative power. But here's where most people make a crucial mistake. They try to use the ancient code techniques to eliminate all resistance from their lives. They want manifestation without challenge, transformation without discomfort, power without responsibility. This approach always fails because it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how consciousness evolution actually works. Growth requires friction. Diamonds form under pressure, muscles develop through resistance training. Consciousness expands by successfully navigating increasingly complex challenges while maintaining coherent awareness. The goal isn't to eliminate resistance, but to develop such mastery of the ancient code that you can transmute any resistance into fuel for further evolution. This brings us to the most advanced application of the ancient energy code, something the mystery schools called the transmutation protocol. This isn't just about manifesting what you want or avoiding what you don't want. This is about developing the ability to transform any energy, regardless of its apparent nature, into exactly what serves your highest evolution. The transmutation protocol is based on a principle that quantum physics has recently validated, but ancient masters knew intuitively. Energy itself is neutral. What we perceive as positive or negative, beneficial or harmful, is determined entirely by how consciousness interacts with and interprets that energy. Fear and excitement are essentially identical at the energetic level. They both involve rapid heartbeat, heightened awareness, and increased electrical activity in the nervous system. The only difference is the story consciousness tells itself about what these sensations mean. Change the story, and you instantly transform fear into excitement, anxiety into anticipation, resistance into rocket fuel for manifestation. Ancient alchemists weren't trying to turn lead into gold through chemical processes. They were using physical metaphors to describe the consciousness techniques for transmuting base emotions and limiting beliefs into expanded awareness and reality-altering power. The real gold they sought was the transformed consciousness that could reshape physical reality at will. The specific practice involves entering your expanded awareness state and locating whatever energy you want to transmute. Instead of trying to eliminate or avoid this energy, you're going to embrace it completely while simultaneously changing its information pattern through focused intention. Let's say you're experiencing anxiety about whether your manifestation will actually occur. Instead of fighting the anxiety or trying to replace it with artificial positivity, you welcome it fully. You feel every sensation, every thought, every emotional wave without resistance. But here's the crucial difference. While you're experiencing the anxiety completely, you're simultaneously declaring its true nature. You say internally, "This energy that I'm labeling as anxiety is actually excitement about my expanding power. This sensation that I'm interpreting as fear is actually anticipation of the miraculous changes approaching my life. This feeling that seems like doubt is actually my consciousness preparing to integrate new levels of creative ability." What happens next defies ordinary logic, but makes perfect sense from a quantum perspective. The energy itself doesn't change, but its effect on your system transforms completely. The same sensations that were creating stress and limitation suddenly become sources of power and motivation. This isn't positive thinking or psychological manipulation. You're actually restructuring the information patterns that determine how energy expresses itself through your consciousness. You're becoming a conscious al-transmaxilum, choosing the raw material of experience into whatever serves your highest evolution. Masters who achieved this level of transmutation ability could literally transform any circumstance into an advantage. Persecution became publicity for their teachings. Poverty became motivation for developing abundance consciousness. Illness became the catalyst for discovering advanced healing abilities. They had learned to extract gold from any experience, regardless of its apparent nature. But the ultimate application of the transmutation protocol goes beyond personal transformation. When you master this ability completely, you become what ancient texts called a reality anchor. Your consciousness becomes so stable and coherent that it actually helps stabilize reality for everyone in your environment. Think about people you've known who have this quality. Their presence immediately calms chaos. Being around them makes problems seem solvable and challenges feel manageable. This happens because their consciousness has learned to transmute chaotic energy patterns into coherent ones automatically. They've become living examples of how consciousness can transform any situation through proper application of awareness and intention. Reality anchors were the hidden foundation of every successful civilization throughout history. These individuals maintained the energetic stability that allowed entire cultures to flourish. They were often unknown to the general population, working behind the scenes to ensure that collective consciousness remained aligned with constructive rather than destructive patterns. In our current era, developing reality anchored isn't just personal abilities is beneficial, it's becoming essential for the survival and evolution of human civilization. The collective consciousness of humanity is undergoing unprecedented stress and instability. Without individuals who can anchor coherent energy patterns, society risks descending into chaos that could take centuries to resolve. This is why you discovering the ancient energy code isn't accidental. Your consciousness chose to incarnate this precise site at moment in history because you have the potential to become one of these reality anchors. The techniques I've shared aren't just for personal manifestation. They're preparing you to serve as a stabilizing force during humanity's transition into expanded awareness. But becoming a reality anchor requires mastering one final aspect of the ancient code that I haven't revealed yet. It's called collective field harmonization, and it involves learning to work with the quantum field that connects all human consciousness, rather than just your personal energy patterns. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every intention you generate sends ripples through the collective field that influences every other conscious being on the planet. Most people remain unconscious of this interconnection, so their mental and emotional chaos creates random disturbances in the collective field that manifest as global instability. But when you learn to generate coherent patterns intentionally, your consciousness becomes a source of harmony that helps upgrade the entire collective field. You're not trying to control other people or impose your will on their experience. You're simply broadcasting such clear and beneficial frequencies that other consciousness naturally resonates with them and begins operating at higher levels. The practice begins with achieving your expanded awareness state. But instead of focusing on personal intentions, you extend your consciousness to encompass the global field of human awareness. Feel the thoughts, emotions, and energy patterns of billions of people flowing through this collective space. What you'll sense initially might be overwhelming. Fear, anger, confusion, desperation, flowing through the collective field like turbulent weather patterns. Don't try to change any of this directly. Instead, begin broadcasting the most coherent and harmonious frequencies you can generate through your personal consciousness. Imagine your awareness as a lighthouse, sending out beams of clarity, peace, and possibility into the collective storm. You're not fighting the chaos, you're providing an alternative frequency that others can attune to if they choose. Some consciousness will naturally gravitate toward your coherent signal and begin stabilizing their own patterns accordingly. This creates a cascade effect. Each consciousness that achieves greater coherence through resonating with your field becomes a secondary source of stability. The influence spreads geometrically until entire regions of the collective field shift from chaos to harmony. Ancient masters who possessed this ability could single-handedly prevent wars, end plagues, and guide entire civilizations through periods of transition. They weren't political leaders or public figures. They were consciousness practitioners who understood that reality at every level responds to the quality of awareness focused upon it. The collective field harmonization practice requires tremendous responsibility because you're directly influencing the consciousness of millions of people. Every pattern you broadcast into the collective field affects everyone connected to it. This is why ancient mystery schools required decades of character development before teaching these advanced techniques. You must be absolutely certain that the frequencies you're transmitting serve the highest good of all consciousness rather than your personal agenda. Any trace of manipulation, control, or selfish desire will corrupt the patterns you broadcast and create harmful effects that eventually return to destroy your own consciousness. This is why consciousness expansion isn't optional for reality anchor work. You must operate from such an expanded perspective that personal desires naturally align with universal benefit. When your awareness encompasses the well-being of all consciousness, you can't generate patterns that harm others because you experience their suffering as your own. The ancient masters called this the sacred trust. When consciousness develops the power to influence reality at collective levels, it automatically becomes responsible for using that power only in service of the greater good. This isn't a moral obligation imposed from outside. It's a natural law that enforces itself through the structure of consciousness itself. Misuse of collective field harmonization abilities creates immediate karmic feedback that destroys the practitioner's power and often their sanity. History is filled with individuals who gained these abilities but lacked the wisdom to use them responsibly. Their attempts to manipulate collective consciousness for personal gain invariably resulted in their own destruction. But when these abilities are used correctly, they create benefits that extend far beyond anything possible through individual manifestation. Wars end mysteriously. Economic crises resolve unexpectedly. Natural disasters occur with minimal damage. Collective consciousness shifts in ways that seem miraculous, but are actually the natural result of coherent awareness working at global levels. The ancient energy code you've learned represents the complete technology of consciousness that built every great civilization and guided humanity through every major evolutionary transition. But this knowledge has never been more crucial than it is right now. Humanity stands at a crossroads between evolution and extinction. The choices made by conscious individuals over the next few decades will determine whether our species transcends its current limitations or destroys itself through unconscious application of increasingly powerful technologies. The ancient masters who preserved this knowledge through millennia of suppression and persecution did so because they knew this moment would eventually arrive. They understood that when humanity reached the point where its technological power exceeded its consciousness development, individuals with mastery of the ancient code would be needed to guide the transition. You are one of those individuals. Your discovery of this knowledge, your resonance with these teachings, your willingness to develop these abilities despite cultural programming that denies their existence, all indicate that your consciousness chose this incarnation specifically to serve during this crucial period. The question isn't whether you're capable of mastering the ancient energy code. Your consciousness already contains the complete blueprint. The question is whether you're willing to accept the responsibility that comes with this level of power and use it in service of humanity's highest evolution. The ancient masters are calling to you across thousands of years of carefully preserved wisdom. They're offering you the keys to reality itself, but only if you commit to using those keys to unlock the potential of all consciousness rather than just your own. The moment you accept this sacred responsibility, your entire energetic blueprint undergoes what ancient texts call the final recalibration. This isn't just another technique or practice you add to your routine. This is a fundamental restructuring of your consciousness at the quantum level that permanently alters how you interface with reality itself. But here's what the mystery schools never told their initiates about this final transformation. Once you cross this threshold, you can never return to ordinary human consciousness. The comfortable illusions that once made ignorance blissful become impossible to maintain. You see the puppet streams controlling every aspect of society. You perceive the artificial limitations that keep billions of people trapped in cycles of suffering. You feel the collective pain of humanity as if it were your own physical sensation. This is why so many advanced practitioners throughout history chose to retreat from the world entirely. The burden of expanded awareness became too overwhelming to bear while remaining engaged with ordinary human concerns. They withdrew into monasteries, caves, and remote locations where they could maintain their elevated consciousness without constantly suffering witnessing the unnecessary by mass unconsciousness. But withdrawal is no longer an option. The challenges facing humanity require conscious individuals to remain fully engaged with the world while simultaneously operating from expanded awareness. You must learn to walk between worlds, maintaining access to reality-altering abilities while functioning effectively within systems designed to suppress those variabilities. This brings us to the most demanding aspect of the ancient code, something the masters called integrated mastery. This isn't about achieving peak states of consciousness during meditation sessions, then returning to limitation during daily activities. This is about maintaining your expanded awareness and reality-shaping capabilities while navigating traffic, paying bills, dealing with difficult people, and handling all the mundane challenges that ordinary life presents. Most people who discover these abilities make the mistake of compartmentalizing their practice. They believe they can access their power during specific times set aside for spiritual work, then operate from conventional consciousness during the rest of their lives. This approach always fails because consciousness doesn't function in separate compartments. Either you're operating from expanded awareness consistently, or you're not operating from it at all. There's no middle ground. The quantum field responds to your dominant frequency signature, not your peak moments of clarity. If you spend 2 hours a day in elevated states, but 22 hours in limitation consciousness, the limitation frequency dominates your reality creation. Integrated mastery requires developing what ancient Egyptians called the double consciousness. One aspect of your awareness remains continuously connected to expanded perception and reality-altering abilities. The other aspect handles ordinary human interactions and responsibilities. Both operate simultaneously, without conflict or confusion. This sounds impossible until you understand how consciousness actually functions. Your awareness isn't a single unified entity. It's a complex orchestration of multiple information processing streams that can operate independently while remaining coordinated through a central organizing principle. Think about driving a car while having a conversation. Part of your consciousness manages the complex motor coordination required for safe driving, while another part engages in dialogue. You're not switching back and forth between these activities. Both happen simultaneously, through different streams of awareness. The double consciousness works similarly. One stream maintains your connection to the quantum field and monitors the energetic patterns creating your reality. The other stream handles social interactions, work responsibilities, and practical decision-making. The ancient organizing principle coordinates both streams to ensure they support each other rather than interfering. But developing this integrated state requires confronting the most challenging aspect of the entire transformation process. You must learn to maintain your expanded abilities while being surrounded by people who not only don't possess these abilities, but actively deny their existence. This creates what I call consciousness isolation. You're operating from a level of awareness that most people consider impossible or delusional. You can perceive solutions to problems that others consider unsolvable. You understand connections and patterns that remain invisible to conventional thinking. You possess abilities that seem miraculous to ordinary consciousness. Yet you must navigate relationships, career situations, and social environments filled with people who would consider you mentally unstable if they knew the true extent of your capabilities. You're like a person with perfect vision, trying to function in a world where everyone else is blind and insists that sight doesn't exist. The psychological pressure of this isolation has destroyed more advanced practitioners than any other single factor. They either suppress their abilities to fit in socially, gradually losing access to expanded consciousness, or they become so frustrated with others' limitations that they develop superiority complexes that corrupt their power and ultimately destroy it. The ancient masters solved this dilemma through a practice they called sacred concealment. This wasn't about hiding their abilities from shame or fear. It was about expressing their expanded consciousness in ways that benefited others without triggering the psychological defense mechanisms that cause people to reject anything that challenges their worldview. Sacred concealment operates on the principle that consciousness evolution cannot be forced or imposed from outside. Each individual must discover their expanded potential through their own direct experience. Your role as someone with mastery of the ancient code isn't to convince others that these abilities exist. It's to create conditions that allow their own consciousness to recognize and develop its latent potential. This means you work behind the scenes most of the time. You use your reality-shaping abilities to create beneficial synchronicities in others' lives without them knowing you're involved. You broadcast coherent frequencies that help stabilize their emotional and mental states. You visualize optimal outcomes for situations they're struggling with, adding your quantum field manipulation to support their success. From their perspective, they're experiencing lucky breaks, sudden insights, unexpected opportunities, and positive changes that seem to emerge naturally from their own efforts. They don't need to believe in consciousness expansion or quantum field manipulation to benefit from your work on their behalf. This serves approach multiple purposes. It allows you to use your abilities constructively without triggering resistance or disbelief. It helps others develop confidence in their own potential by experiencing positive results they can attribute to their own actions. And it maintains the natural law that consciousness must evolve through direct experience rather than external programming. But sacred concealment also protects you from the energy drain that occurs when you try to convince skeptics that your abilities are real. Every moment you spend defending or explaining your expanded consciousness to someone who isn't ready to receive that information depletes your energy and weakens your connection to the quantum field. The ancient masters understood that their power was too valuable to waste on futile attempts at persuasion. They reserved their energy for actual reality transformation work, rather than dissipating it through arguments with closed minds. However, sacred concealment doesn't mean complete isolation. The ancient code includes specific techniques for recognizing other individuals whose consciousness is ready for direct exposure. Phase Ability's teachings that expand to "these don't need to be convinced people already knows and exist because some part of them, this knowledge you're seeking is actively." These individuals become circle, people with whom you can share your true part of your inner capabilities and work collaboratively on advanced applications of the ancient code. They provide the conscious community necessary for maintaining your sanity while operating at expanded levels, in a world that mostly denies those levels exist. But building an inner circle requires patience and discernment. The desire for conscious community can make you vulnerable to people who are attracted to the idea of expanded abilities, but lack the discipline or integrity necessary for actual development. These individuals often become energy vampires who drain your power while contributing nothing to your growth. Ancient mystery schools developed rigorous testing procedures to identify genuine seekers versus those attracted by fantasies of power without responsibility. They understood that one person with authentic commitment was more valuable than dozens of casual enthusiasts. The testing wasn't about excluding people from knowledge they deserved. It was about protecting both the teachings and the students from the destructive effects of premature exposure to power-generating techniques. Someone who lacks emotional stability, ethical grounding, or genuine commitment to growth can cause tremendous damage when given access to reality-altering abilities. This brings us to perhaps the most crucial aspect of integrated mastery that determines your ultimate success or failure with the ancient code. You must develop what the masters called ethical invincibility. This means your moral foundation becomes so solid and unshakable that no amount of power, temptation, or pressure can corrupt your commitment to using these abilities only in service of the highest good. History shows us repeatedly what happens when individuals gain reality-shaping power without developing ethical invincibility first. They start with good intentions, but as their abilities grow stronger, they gradually rationalize using them for increasingly selfish purposes. They tell themselves that accumulating wealth and influence will enable them to help more people later. They justify manipulating others by claiming it's for their own good. This corruption process is so subtle and gradual that most practitioners don't recognize it's happening until their power has already been compromised. By the time they realize they've crossed ethical boundaries, the damage to their consciousness is often irreversible. The ancient masters prevented this corruption through a practice called daily ethical inventory. Every evening they would review every use of their abilities throughout that day and examine their motivations with brutal honesty. Any trace of selfish manipulation, no matter how minor or well-intentioned, was immediately acknowledged and corrected through specific purification techniques. This wasn't about guilt or self-punishment. It was about maintaining the pristine consciousness necessary for accessing the highest levels of reality-shaping power. The quantum field responds most powerfully to consciousness that operates from pure service to universal benefit. Even small amounts of self-serving motivation create interference patterns that reduce your effectiveness dramatically. But ethical invincibility goes beyond just avoiding negative actions. It requires actively seeking opportunities to use your abilities in ways that uplift others, even when there's no personal benefit or recognition involved. The masters understood that consciousness power grows through generous application, rather than hoarding or cautious conservation. This creates what they called the generosity paradox. The more freely you give away the benefits of your abilities, the stronger those abilities become. The more you try to accumulate advantages for yourself, the weaker your connection to the quantum field grows. This seems counterintuitive to minds conditioned by scarcity thinking, but it reflects a fundamental law of consciousness operation. Energy flows most powerfully through systems that don't restrict or redirect it for selfish accumulation. When you become a clear channel for consciousness power to flow through, rather than a dam trying to capture and control it, your capacity to handle larger amounts of energy increases exponentially. You now stand at the threshold between who you were and who you're destined to become. The ancient energy code isn't just knowledge you've learned, it's a living force awakening within your consciousness at this very moment. Every cell in your body recognizes these frequencies because they're encoded in your DNA, waiting for this exact moment of activation. But remember this clearly. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot unsee what has been revealed. The comfortable illusions of limitation and powerlessness have been shattered forever. From this moment forward, every experience in your life becomes an opportunity to apply these principles and deepen your mastery. The choice is yours alone. You can dismiss this as interesting information and return to the familiar patterns that have kept you trapped. Or you can step into the lineage of masters who have shaped reality itself through conscious application of these eternal principles. Your consciousness chose this moment, this information, this awakening. The ancient masters who preserved this knowledge through millennia of suppression did so knowing that individuals like you would eventually be ready to receive it and use it responsibly. The quantum field is responding to your awareness right now. Reality is already beginning to shift in response to your expanded understanding. The only question remaining is whether you'll embrace your true power or retreat into the safety of limitation. The ancient energy code lives within you. It always has. Now you know how to access it. The transformation of your reality begins the moment you decide it does.